Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Dan Summerby with Advocatecitizen.com, where we bring important issues to the forefront. There are many things you can be an advocate for, such as animal rights, voting, politics, just to name a few. Today we're going to focus on using music to inspire, educate, and uplift. This is the lighter side of Advocatecitizen.com. Advocating through music, in particular the jazz genre, has been around for many years, since the creation of jazz in the early 19th, late 20th century. Houston has Jazz Education, Inc., inspiring education through music. We are fortunate to have legend, drummer, founder of the Jazz Education, Inc., Bubbha Thomas. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
We are equally fortunate to have former student of the Summer Jazz Workshop and up-and-coming musician, saxophonist, Stephen Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Bubbha, tell us about the Jazz Education, Inc. Let's go back to the 1970s. Why did you create it, and what was your inspiration?
Well, Stephen and I was talking about this when we were on the way in here. In the early 70s, late 60s and early 70s, jazz was a dirty name.
Right.
You know, the musicians were tagged as being, lazy. Some people crawl out of a hole, or, drug addicts. Some people didn't get, up until 3 or 4 o'clock, and, it was just a negative. So the people that I knew and the people I played with, they weren't like that. All of us was college educated.
Right.
And we all, I don't think anybody in the band drank a beer. So we were serious about the music, very serious about the music. But you get out there and then you understand, you get a rude awakening that there are very few ears that are listening to you,
Right, right.
So I decided that I was going to come up with this project called August Jazz Month in Houston. And I figured if I did a whole month of celebrations and, different venues, churches,
Right.
and parks and stuff, I would kind of drop into make a dent into the perception of what people thought about jazz musicians. But was I ever wrong?
How so?
Well, because after a certain age, people have already developed a musical taste, and if jazz is not in that mix,
Right.
then it's almost like speaking a foreign language to these people.
That's why it's so important to get out there and be starting with the youngsters like you're doing, right?
Well, that was the next step.
Yeah.
In 1972, I decided, and I went to the late Conrad Johnson, because he was my high school band director, and I said, look, man, I want to make something happen for young people. Because if you look at sports and other disciplines, they start with young people.
Right.
Baseball, football. So you have to train people at a young age to be receptive to the music. And then a little bit later on, I found there was another audience, like an elementary school audience.
Right.
Summer Jazz Workshop was basically for high school and college students at the time. But it's middle school now, basically the center of it. But it was just to work into
Sure.
getting younger people involved in the music and getting them to understand that all this noise that was going on in the adult population wasn't true over here where you are.
Right.
So, it took a while, but sort of caught on. And
I say so. You're here today.
and not only that, it's like you look at it for jazz education, it's twofold. We wanted to deal with the musicians training, but we also wanted to deal with the general public and getting them to come out and listen to Stephen.
Right.
So you fight in these two fronts. But if you fight the front through the training, then you have more ears.
Sure.
Because it's difficult for a kid, like when we would go to the schools with the elementary school, jazz and poetry, the kid would go home and say, well, Bubbha Thomas was at school today, and man, we enjoyed it. Well, he didn't say he enjoyed the jazz music, but that's what we were playing. Talking about Louis Armstrong, Arnie
Right.
Carver, and people like that. All they knew that they enjoyed the program. So they would go back and the feedback would be real positive. So it would be difficult for any adult to come and tell this kid something negative about
jazz.
jazz.
Okay. Stephen, let's bring you in. You're no stranger to Mr. Thomas. You were a student at the Summer Jazz Workshop. And what inspired you to first go there, and how has it helped you as a person and a musician since you've been?
Well, I first learned about the Summer Jazz Workshop from my band director, Mr. Ronald Thornton, the late, great Ronald Thornton, who was the band director at Willow Ridge High School. And what would happen was he would talk about a program that would take place in the summer. I had seen it in action previously to going to it, but he's the one who shed light, because when I was attending Willow Ridge, there was a campus, or I guess you could say a location that opened, another branch of the Summer Jazz Workshop that opened, that was held at Willow Ridge. Normally it was just held at Texas Southern University. But when that branch opened at Willow Ridge, I lived right down the street from the high school. So it was perfect. It was like, you have no choice but to go to this. And that opened up everything to me, because I was familiar with jazz. I had taken private lessons from Mr. Conrad Johnson, private lessons, but now I was able to take what I was learning in those private lessons and actually put them to use in front of an audience, as Mr. Thomas spoke about. Because what we would do during this course was we would learn music theory, different branches.
And business.
And business, yeah. Taught by Mr. Al Campbell, absolutely. Yeah. And we would learn all of these things. It was like a class, a school during the summer, and we would rotate. And then at the end on Friday, we would take this out, but we've learned how to public speak in front of people. And then we would take that out and perform in front of an audience. And we would have to get up in front of the band and introduce the songs, introduce ourselves. So that prepared me for what I do now. So if I didn't have that training then, I would be behind the 8 ball, so to speak, and I don't know really where I would be if it weren't for that program, the Summer Jazz Workshop. So it was my foundation musically.
I think the key word that he said is training. And that's what we have to do.
In any discipline, not just music. You're right.
Right.
And Bubbha, I know you have your 25th anniversary coming up this summer. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. That's it's Houston International Jazz Festival.
You're going to have Mayor Annise Parker, and she's going to be using a famous baton, I'm told, by a famous
Toscanini.
Yes, tell me about that and that event. And is the mayor a big jazz fan?
Well, I don't know whether she's a big jazz fan or not, but she is a former musician. She played saxophone in high school, you know. So she has some sensitivity to the music. And she followed a tradition that was started by Mayor Lee Brown of coming and being a part of the Mayor's Jazz Brunch.
Right.
And it really being entertained by the young kids from the Summer Jazz Workshop. So this past August, we were sitting and talking, and I thought it was her last year in office. So I don't know what crack I made. But she said, oh no, I have one more year. So then, you know, I'm always thinking of how to involve people and get them involved. So I said, oh, okay. I said, well, look, we have this baton that was used in 1950 by Arturo Toscanini.
Is it in a vault?
No, I tell you what, it should be. It's in a little
plastic case.
No, not plastic. Wood.
Got to give us some class.
Yes.
First class.
And it's at my house.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it was given to me or given to us by George Strait Jr.
Oh wow.
From the Strait Foundation. We had, I don't know whether Stephen was in the workshop at that time or not, but we had him. You know, they have this foundation, so they make contributions to jazz education. So he came out to see the program in action. So when we got back downtown, Pat Prater, one of our board members, was with me, and he said, wait a minute, I have something I want to give you. So he went upstairs to his office and brought this case down and gave it to me and said, I want you guys to have this. So my first thought was, what am I going to do with this thing?
Right.
You know? But it's a good history behind that thing, because we've had people like the late Marvin Zindler to come up and use the baton.
Oh, wow.
And to conduct the summer jazz workshop. He did it at the hospital, which was really perfect. You know, at the hospital. Mayor Lee Brown, former mayor of Houston, he used the, you know. So I figured, well, Mayor Parker, we got this baton. Can I get a commitment from you to conduct the Summer Jazz Workshop All-Star?
Absolutely.
Next year? She said, certainly. So off we went.
Very good. We've heard about Conrad Johnson. Obviously, we can't talk about jazz here in Texas, and particularly here in Houston. You've both been influenced by Conrad Johnson. Stephen, tell us about your inspiration from him.
I remember going to his home early Saturday morning, and before that even happened, I knew about Prof, which we call him, and I would call him and I said, Mr. Johnson, I would like to have private lessons. He said, I'm busy. My schedule is really, really full, because everyone wanted to study under him. Right. But what he did, he said, okay. He said, come to my house 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. I was there. And from there, bright and early. And he made time in his schedule. And from there, he gave me the foundation.
So he mentored you.
He mentored me in addition to...
Individually.
Absolutely. That private lesson was very important, because he was a saxophonist, like me. Right. But he would get to the piano, and he teaches you the blues, which is the essence of everything. Right. And he teaches you the format of the blues, and then it turns into improvisation, which is what jazz is. Instant composition. And from there, it kind of slides into the Summer Jazz Workshop, because you take what you learn there and you move on. But what he would do was every private lesson he would take, I'm dating myself, but he would take a cassette tape.
You're younger than both of us.
Yeah, he would take a cassette tape and record the whole lesson, so I could hear what I did and what he taught me. And then I would take it home and put it in, listen, and then practice and learn from the mistakes, and then bring it back the next week. So I have a tape full of lessons, but those memories are very precious, and once again, my musical foundation.
Well, you know, in addition to Stephen being in the Summer Jazz Workshop, he was also an instructor one summer.
That's right. Yeah, right. That was a surprise, but a true privilege to now be able to give back. And to understand how those students feel on the other side. I was able to teach the theory class at Willow Ridge High School, the same location. I received that same class. So, yeah, I was appreciative for Mr. Thomas for giving me that opportunity.
All right. Yeah. Well, Stephen, of course, we want to hear you play something. You brought your sax. Of course, we want to hear what you're famous for. If you could.
He brought his whistle.
Take the floor and tell us what you're going to do, and we'd love to hear a little bit from you.
Okay. Well, I have to put it together first.
Sure.
But I think something that I could do is a nice Duke Ellington composition that he wrote many years ago, probably one of his more famous pieces that a lot of other artists have recorded. It's entitled In a Sentimental Mood.
Okay, sounds good. All right, put that together, and I'll talk with Bubbha a little bit, and then let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
Bubbha, you were also influenced by Conrad Johnson. You were legendary drummer. Tell us about your experiences with him.
Well, he was my high school band director.
Right.
And when I started the Summer Jazz Workshop, freshly out of college, just come back off the road, playing R&B, and I knew that the training that you need in order to make it in college, when I got to college, I didn't have it. So I went to Mr. Johnson and said, look, I have this idea. I'd like to start a summer program for kids who are like me, that don't have no musical experience, no notation, none of that.
Right.
You just learn to play and march up and down the field and play for different functions. But you never learn, like what Stephen was saying, improvisation, orchestration, how to write music, how to write a resume, all those kinds of things. So Mr. Johnson said, I'm with you all the way. I said, because as young as I am, people are not going to believe me. So I really need you to, stand shoulder to shoulder with me. And he did all the way. So it was really good because it was like his stamp of approval
Sure.
was really the thing that made it kind of okay. People would say, okay, then if Conrad's involved in this, then we'll take a look at it. So, and he would bring all his students to the Summer Jazz Workshop, especially some of his guys that he wanted to do well during the school year.
Excellent.
They won out of 45 contests. I think they won either 43 or 44, which is phenomenal. I know.
Absolutely.
Any football team
with that winning percentage,
yeah.
you'd be winning champion.
Yeah. So.
Very good.
It was good, man. By me being a drummer, I listened to what Stephen was saying, and my son's a trombone player. And every time, he would practice at home, I would say, man, you missed that note. And he would say, oh, so we get into a little verbal exchange. So I would say, okay, then what I'm going to do, tape him. So I taped him. I didn't have to tell him, listen. So I can understand what Stevens is saying about Conrad. Conrad would put together the tape so he could tell you and show you. Listen to yourself. And that's really the essence of it, because if you don't know what you're doing and you can't really understand what you're doing and you don't have any feedback, because Conrad couldn't be there with him all the time, but he could be there with the tape. So you put the tape on, the tape tell you, it's almost like the video things that we see now.
Right, you have you're teaching him yourself.
Yeah.
That's good. But you only play the drums. How did you get into the drums instead of other instruments, or how did you get into playing the drums?
Well, I tell you what, it's interesting. I didn't ever start out to be a drummer or a musician. My mother was very good playing the piano. Matter of fact, she was so good, she was one of the few musicians during her time who could read music.
Oh,
so
wow.
A lot of churches would hold church services around her availability to get to the to church to play for the choir. And I would sit and listen to her play, practice, and stuff like that. And my dad was a minister, was a preacher. So my dad didn't know a note if it walked through the door. but he could hear. And he would frustrate her because she would sit down and read from the hymn book and just read, and he'd sit next to her, and then he'd play everything that she had just played to him back.
Great.
Yeah. So that was a family in our community named Denmans. And the Denmans had a lot of kids, well, a bunch of boys, who were musicians.